The day you stop reacting, reality changes. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that almost everything controlling your emotions is invisible. Not other people, not the economy, not your circumstances, not your past. Instead, it is a process happening inside your own mind hundreds of times every day. A process so automatic that you rarely notice it. Someone says a word and you react. A memory appears and you react. A notification arrives and you react. A plan fails and you react. An expectation is not met and you react. After years of repeating this cycle, most people begin to believe that life is happening to them. They begin to believe that their emotions are created by circumstances, that their peace depends on outcomes, and that their happiness depends on the world behaving the way they want it to behave. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the real prison was never the world around you? What if the real prison was your unconscious reaction to it? Think about the last thing that upset you. Maybe someone criticized you. Maybe your relationship ended. Maybe something didn't go according to plan. At first glance, it seems obvious what caused the pain. The event happened, and the pain followed. But if you look more carefully, something interesting begins to appear. The event happened once. The thinking happened hundreds of times. The conversation ended once. The replaying of that conversation continued for days. The mistake happened once. The mental punishment continued for years. The rejection happened once. The story created around the rejection became part of identity. What if the event was only responsible for a small portion of the suffering? What if the majority of suffering came from reaction? This possibility changes everything because it shifts attention away from trying to control reality and toward understanding the mechanism through which reality is experienced. Most people spend their lives attempting to manage circumstances. They try to arrange the external world in ways that will finally allow them to feel safe, peaceful, successful, or fulfilled. They believe that if enough things go right, then they will finally be free. Yet even when circumstances improve, the mind often finds something new to worry about. The goal is reached, but anxiety remains. The relationship arrives, but insecurity remains. The money comes, but fear remains. The achievement is unlocked, but dissatisfaction remains. Why? Because the external situation changed, but the mechanism of reaction remained untouched. And wherever you go, that mechanism goes with you. The person who cannot sit peacefully with themselves in a small apartment often discovers they cannot sit peacefully with themselves in a mansion either. The person who reacts unconsciously in one relationship usually reacts unconsciously in the next. The person who is controlled by fear today will likely be controlled by fear tomorrow, regardless of how many external conditions improve. This is why understanding reaction may be one of the most important things a human being can do, because reaction quietly shapes reality. Not objective reality, experiential reality. The reality you actually live inside every day. And the day you stop reacting automatically is the day reality begins to change. Not because the world changes, because you do. Chapter 1. The prison you cannot see. Most prisons have walls. This one does not. Most prisons are obvious. This one feels normal. That is precisely what makes it so powerful. Imagine someone who has worn a heavy backpack every day since childhood. At first, the weight feels exhausting, but over time, the body adapts. Eventually, the burden becomes familiar. The person stops questioning it. They assume carrying the weight is simply part of life. Many people live this way psychologically. They carry invisible burdens that have become so familiar they no longer notice them. They carry old resentments, unresolved fears, imagined futures, constant comparison, silent self-judgment, and endless mental commentary. Because these patterns have been present for so long, they begin to feel normal. But normal does not mean healthy. Normal does not mean necessary. And normal certainly does not mean freedom. Consider how many emotional states are dictated by external events. A notification appears and your mood changes. Someone compliments you and you feel elevated. Someone ignores you, and suddenly insecurity appears. A number on a screen increases, and you feel successful. The same number decreases, and you feel anxious. Without realizing it, many people spend their lives allowing external conditions to determine internal experience. This creates a subtle form of dependency. When your emotional state depends entirely on circumstances, you become a prisoner of circumstances. The weather controls you. Other people control you. Social media controls you. News headlines control you. Opinions control you. Every event becomes a remote control for your nervous system. And most people never notice this happening. Instead, they assume that reacting is natural. They assume that every emotional impulse deserves obedience. They assume that because a feeling appears, it must be followed. But appearance does not equal truth. A thought can appear without being true. An emotion can appear without being useful. A reaction can appear without being necessary. Yet most people never question the process. The moment anger appears, they become anger. The moment fear appears, they become fear. The moment insecurity appears, they become insecurity. The observer disappears, and only the reaction remains. This is where suffering gains its power, not from the event itself, but from unconscious identification with the reaction. Imagine standing beside a lake during a perfectly calm morning. The water is still. The surface reflects everything clearly. You can see depth. You can see detail. You can see reality as it is. Now, imagine throwing stones into the water every few seconds. Ripples spread everywhere. The reflection becomes distorted. The deeper layers disappear beneath movement. The mind operates in much the same way. Most people are constantly throwing stones into their own consciousness. Every fear creates another ripple. Every judgment creates another ripple. Every imagined future creates another ripple. Every unnecessary reaction creates another ripple. Eventually, clarity disappears beneath psychological turbulence. And because the turbulence has existed for so long, people mistake it for reality itself. This is why many people spend years searching for answers without ever examining the mechanism through which they experience life. They focus entirely on changing circumstances while ignoring the lens through which those circumstances are viewed. They assume that if enough external problems disappear, peace will finally arrive. Yet peace continues to feel distant because the mind itself remains unsettled. Ancient philosophers noticed this pattern thousands of years ago. Long before modern psychology, they observed that human beings often suffer twice. First, they suffer from the event itself. Then they suffer from their interpretation of the event. Sometimes the second form of suffering becomes far greater than the first. A difficult conversation lasts 10 minutes. The mind replays it for 10 years. A mistake happens once. The memory repeats endlessly. A rejection occurs in a single moment. The story created around that rejection becomes part of identity. The event ends, but the reaction continues. This is one of the strangest aspects of the human experience. Reality is temporary. Thoughts about reality can become permanent. Many people spend most of their lives reliving situations that no longer exist. Their bodies exist in the present, but their attention remains trapped in old memories, imagined futures, or fictional scenarios created entirely by the mind. Think about how much of your day is spent dealing with things that are not actually happening. You worry about conversations that have not occurred. You replay moments that are already gone. You imagine problems that may never exist. You rehearse arguments. You predict disasters. You construct entire realities inside your mind and then emotionally react to them as if they were real. The body often cannot tell the difference. A frightening thought creates genuine tension. An imagined failure creates genuine anxiety. A remembered embarrassment creates genuine discomfort. The experience feels real because the reaction is real, even when the object of that reaction exists only in imagination. This is how unconscious reaction quietly steals life away. Not dramatically, Not all at once, but moment by moment. A beautiful sunset appears, but attention is somewhere else. A loved one speaks, but the mind is replaying yesterday. An opportunity arrives, but fear is imagining tomorrow. Life continues unfolding, yet awareness remains trapped inside reaction. Most people never notice how much they're missing because the habit has become normal. They assume that constant mental activity is simply part of being human. They assume that endless worry is responsibility. They assume that overthinking is intelligence. They assume that reacting is unavoidable. But what if reaction is not inevitable? What if it is simply a habit? And if it is a habit, then perhaps it can be observed. If it can be observed, perhaps it can be understood. And if it can be understood, perhaps it no longer has to control you. This realization marks the beginning of a profound shift. For the first time, attention turns inward, not in an attempt to escape the world, but in an attempt to understand the machinery through which the world is experienced. You begin noticing thoughts as they appear. You begin noticing emotional impulses before they take over. You begin noticing the stories the mind creates automatically. And most importantly, you begin noticing that there is something within you capable of observing all of it. That observer is different from the reaction. The observer notices fear. The observer notices anger. The observer notices anxiety. The observer notices thought itself. And the moment observation becomes possible, unconscious identification begins to weaken. For years, perhaps decades, every thought felt personal. Every emotion felt absolute. Every reaction felt like reality itself. But now a small gap begins to appear. A thought arises. Instead of immediately believing it, you notice it. Fear appears. Instead of becoming it, you observe it. Anger arrives. Instead of expressing it automatically, you watch it unfold. The reaction still exists, but something fundamental has changed. You're no longer completely inside it. You're beginning to see it. And what is seen clearly can no longer dominate in the same way. This is where the prison begins to crack. Not because circumstances improved. Not because life became easier. Not because the world suddenly changed. But because awareness entered a place where unconsciousness once ruled. And awareness changes everything. Chapter 2. Why the mind is addicted to reaction. At this point, an important question begins to emerge. If unconscious reaction creates so much suffering, why does it happen so often? Why does the mind return to the same worries, the same fears, the same emotional loops over and over again? The answer is surprisingly simple. The mind believes reaction is helping you. It believes reaction keeps you safe. For thousands of years, human survival depended on anticipating danger. The people who noticed threats quickly were more likely to survive than those who didn't. A strange sound in the darkness might have meant a predator. A sudden movement in the bushes might have signaled danger. The brain evolved to scan constantly for potential problems. This ability was incredibly useful. The problem is that the world changed much faster than the brain did. Today, most people are not running from predators. They're not fighting for survival every hour of the day. Yet the machinery remains active. The mind continues scanning the environment for threats, looking for something to solve, something to fear, something to prepare for. And when real threats are absent, psychological threats take their place. What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I embarrass myself? What if I make the wrong decision? What if everything falls apart? The mind generates these possibilities endlessly because it believes preparation creates safety. It assumes that if it can think through every scenario, it can somehow protect itself from uncertainty. But uncertainty is part of life. No amount of thinking can eliminate it. No amount of worrying can remove it. No amount of mental rehearsal can guarantee a perfect future. Yet the mind continues trying. This is where reaction becomes addictive. Not because suffering feels good, because reacting creates the illusion of control. When people worry, they often feel productive. They feel as though they're doing something useful. Even when the worry accomplishes nothing, it creates the sensation of action. This is why many people struggle to let go of their worries. Without realizing it, they associate worrying with responsibility. They believe that if they stop worrying, they will become careless. If they stop overthinking, they will become unprepared. If they stop reacting, they will become vulnerable. But look carefully at your own experience. How many problems have actually been solved through anxiety? How many fears disappeared because you worried hard enough? How many sleepless nights improve the future? The answer is usually very few. Most of the time, worry simply drains energy from the present while offering nothing in return. Yet the cycle continues because the mind mistakes activity for effectiveness. The same thing happens with emotional reactions. Many people believe anger gives them strength. Others believe fear keeps them safe. Some believe self-criticism helps them improve. But often the opposite is true. Fear shrinks possibility. Anger clouds judgment. Self-criticism weakens confidence. The reaction claims to be helping while secretly creating the very problems it promises to solve. There's another force involved as well. The ego. The ego is not a bad thing. It is simply the image you have created of yourself. It is the story you tell about who you are. It is the collection of beliefs, memories, labels, successes, failures, and experiences that form your identity. The ego wants stability. It wants certainty. Most importantly, it wants protection. Whenever something threatens the story you tell about yourself, reaction appears. Someone questions your opinion. Reaction. Someone criticizes your behavior. Reaction. Someone disagrees with your beliefs. Reaction. Someone succeeds where you feel inadequate. Reaction. Notice what is happening. The event itself is not the problem. The problem is that the event challenges identity. The ego interprets this challenge as danger. And because the ego feels personal, the reaction feels justified. This creates an endless cycle of conflict. People defend ideas they barely understand. They carry resentment for years. They replay arguments long after they are over. They become emotionally trapped by experiences that happened decades ago. Not because the events are still occurring, because the identity built around those events remains active. The mind keeps returning to familiar emotional territory, and familiarity is incredibly powerful. Human beings often prefer familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom. Think about that carefully. People stay in unhealthy relationships because the pain is familiar. People remain trapped in negative habits because the discomfort is predictable. People repeat destructive emotional patterns because uncertainty feels more frightening than repetition. The mind would often rather suffer in a familiar way than step into an unknown possibility. This is one of the reasons growth feels uncomfortable. Growth requires leaving familiar reactions behind. Growth requires stepping beyond old identities. Growth requires uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly what the mind spends most of its energy trying to avoid. This explains why many people sabotage their own progress. They want change consciously, but unconsciously, they fear what change requires. They want peace, but they are addicted to drama. They want freedom, but they are attached to the identity built around their suffering. They want clarity, but they remain loyal to confusion because confusion feels familiar. The mind becomes trapped in a strange contradiction. It says it wants one thing while continuously feeding another. And because this contradiction remains unconscious, the cycle repeats endlessly. Year after year, relationship after relationship, challenge after challenge. The details change. The pattern remains. This is why awareness is so important. Awareness reveals the pattern. Awareness exposes the machinery. Awareness allows you to see what was previously hidden. Imagine walking into a dark room that has been cluttered for years. As long as the room remains dark, you continue stumbling into the same obstacles. You blame the room. You blame your luck. You blame the circumstances. Then someone turns on the light. Suddenly nothing has physically changed. The furniture remains exactly where it was. The obstacles still exist, but now you can see them. And because you can see them, you stop colliding with them in the same way. Awareness functions like that light. It does not instantly remove every fear. It does not eliminate every reaction. It does not magically solve every problem. What it does is make the unconscious conscious. And once something becomes conscious, it begins losing its power over you. Because unconscious patterns survive through invisibility. The moment they are seen clearly, they weaken. You begin noticing the urge to react before the reaction fully takes over. You begin noticing fear before it becomes anxiety. You begin noticing anger before it becomes behavior. You begin noticing thoughts before they become beliefs. This small shift changes everything, because for the first time, there is space. And within that space exists a possibility that most people never discover. The possibility that you do not have to obey every reaction that appears. The possibility that awareness can exist before reaction. The possibility that freedom is closer than you think. And once that possibility is seen, the journey changes completely. Because now the goal is no longer controlling the world. The goal is understanding yourself. And that understanding leads directly to the final realization. The realization that the day you stop reacting automatically is the day reality itself begins to feel different. Chapter 3. The day you stop reacting, reality changes. Most people spend their lives trying to change the world around them. They believe that if they can earn more money, find the right relationship, achieve the right goals, gain the right status, or eliminate enough problems, they will finally experience peace. And yet something strange happens. Even when circumstances improve, the inner struggle often remains. The promotion arrives, but anxiety survives. The relationship begins, but insecurity survives. The achievement is reached, but dissatisfaction survives. The external world changes, yet the internal experience remains surprisingly familiar. This is the moment when many people begin asking deeper questions. What if peace is not waiting at the end of achievement? What if freedom is not hiding inside future circumstances? What if the thing they have been searching for was never located in the external world to begin with? The answer begins with a simple observation. Most suffering is not created by reality. It is created by resistance to reality. Think about how much energy is spent arguing with what already exists. Something happens. The mind says it should not have happened. A situation changes. The mind says it should remain the same. Someone leaves. The mind says they should stay. Life moves forward. The mind demands that it move backward. This resistance creates enormous psychological friction. Not because reality is fighting you, because you are fighting reality. Imagine standing in a river and trying to stop the current with your hands. The harder you push, the more exhausted you become. Not because the river hates you, because the river is simply doing what rivers do. Life operates in a similar way. Everything changes. Everything moves. Everything evolves. Every moment appears and disappears. Every experience arrives and eventually leaves. The mind often resists this process because it wants certainty. It wants permanence. It wants guarantees. But life offers none of those things. And the more desperately the mind searches for certainty, the more tension it creates. This is where awareness becomes transformative. Awareness does not fight reality. Awareness observes reality. Awareness does not demand that life become different. Awareness notices life as it is. This sounds simple. In practice, it changes everything. Because the moment observation replaces reaction, a completely different relationship with experience begins to emerge. Imagine a storm passing through the sky. Dark clouds gather. Rain begins. Thunder echoes. The storm appears powerful, yet the sky itself remains untouched. The storm moves through it. The sky allows it. And eventually, the storm passes. Thoughts operate the same way. Emotions operate the same way. Fear arrives. Anger arrives. Sadness arrives. Excitement arrives. Joy arrives. Every experience moves through awareness like weather moving through the sky. The problem begins when people mistake themselves for the storm. They say, I am angry, I am anxious, I am afraid, I am broken. But look carefully. Anger is being experienced. Anxiety is being experienced. Fear is being experienced. These experiences are appearing inside awareness. They're not the entirety of what you are. The moment this distinction becomes clear, something extraordinary begins to happen. The emotional experience remains, but the identification weakens. You stop becoming every thought that appears. You stop becoming every emotion that arises. You stop becoming every reaction that enters consciousness. Instead, you become the observer. And the observer possesses a freedom that reaction never can. Imagine watching a movie. When you become completely absorbed in the story, your emotions rise and fall with every scene. You forget you are sitting safely in a chair. For a while, the movie becomes your reality. Then suddenly you remember. You remember that you are the observer. You remember that you're watching. The movie continues, but your relationship to it changes. Life is similar. Most people are completely absorbed in the movie of thought. Every fear feels absolute. Every story feels real. Every prediction feels important. Every reaction feels necessary. Then awareness appears. And for the first time, they remember they are watching. The thoughts continue, but the identification weakens. The emotions continue, but the ownership weakens. The reactions continue, but the automatic obedience disappears. This creates space, and space is where freedom lives. Most people think freedom means controlling everything, controlling circumstances, controlling people, controlling outcomes, controlling the future. But real freedom is something very different. Real freedom is the ability to remain conscious regardless of what appears. Because no matter how much control you gain over the world, uncertainty will always remain. Life will continue changing. People will continue surprising you. Challenges will continue appearing. Loss will continue exist. Success will continue come and go. Nothing external can provide permanent stability. But awareness offers something far more valuable. It offers stability in the middle of change. The ability to remain present while life moves. The ability to remain conscious while emotions arise. The ability to remain aware while thoughts come and go. This is why some people appear calm in situations that overwhelm everyone else. It is not because they never experience fear. It is not because they never experience uncertainty. It is because they're no longer completely identified with those experiences. They understand something most people miss. Thoughts are events. Emotions are events. Reactions are events. And events come and go. Awareness remains. The more deeply this is understood, the more life begins to change. Not because circumstances suddenly improve, because perception changes. You begin noticing beauty that was always present. You begin noticing moments that were previously ignored. You begin noticing life itself instead of constantly thinking about life. A conversation becomes richer. A walk becomes deeper. Silence becomes comfortable. Stillness becomes meaningful. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. Not because the world transformed, because your attention returned. This is one of the greatest losses caused by unconscious reaction. It steals presence. It keeps attention trapped in mental stories instead of direct experience. People spend entire sunsets thinking, entire vacations worrying, entire relationships distracted, entire years mentally absent, always preparing for life, rarely living it. Awareness reverses this process. It returns attention to the present moment, not as a philosophy, not as a technique, as a direct experience. You begin seeing that life only ever exists here, not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, not in imagination, not in memory, only here, only now. The mind may travel through time endlessly. Life never does. Life remains in the present. And every reaction that pulls attention away from the present pulls attention away from life itself. This is why freedom often feels surprisingly ordinary. People expect fireworks. They expect mystical experiences. They expect dramatic transformations. Sometimes those things happen. Often they do not. More often, freedom feels simple. A little more space. A little less struggle. A little less identification. A little more presence. A little more clarity. A little more peace. Not because something was added, because something unnecessary was removed. The noise begins fading. The compulsive reactions begin weakening. The endless commentary begins losing authority. And underneath all of it, something that was always present becomes visible. A quiet sense of awareness. A stillness that does not depend on circumstances. A peace that does not require perfection. A presence that exists before thought arrives and remains after thought leaves. Many people spend their entire lives searching for this. They search through achievement, through possessions, through status, through distraction, through endless activity, only to discover that what they were seeking was never absent. It was hidden beneath reaction, hidden beneath identification, hidden beneath mental noise. And the moment those layers begin falling away, reality starts to feel different. The same world exists. The same challenges exist. The same uncertainties exist. Yet everything feels lighter. Not because life became easier, because resistance became weaker. The storm still passes through the sky. But now you know you're the sky. The thoughts still appear. But now you know you're not the thoughts. The emotions still arise. But now you know they are temporary visitors. And with that understanding comes a kind of freedom that circumstances can never provide. Because circumstances always change. Awareness remains. This is why the day you stop reacting automatically changes everything. Not because reality transforms overnight. Not because every problem disappears. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the relationship between you and reality changes. And once that relationship changes, the entire experience of life changes with it. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest, not the richest, not the most powerful. It is the person who can remain conscious when everyone else is reacting. The person who can observe without immediately becoming absorbed. The person who can experience emotion without becoming imprisoned by emotion. The person who understands that awareness is deeper than reaction. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, you stop living as a prisoner of every thought, every fear, every impulse, and every circumstance. For the first time, you begin living consciously. For the first time, you begin experiencing reality directly. For the first time, you discover that freedom was never something you had to create. It was something you had to uncover. And perhaps that is the greatest realization of all. The world may look exactly the same tomorrow. The same people, the same responsibilities, the same challenges, the same uncertainty. But if you stop reacting automatically, you will not be the same. And that changes everything.